Sometimes news happens and is broadcast that you just remember forever where you were and what you were doing and who you were with when you heard the news. We, a few years ago, had a moment that many of us will remember here when Boris Johnson, with his very scruffy hair, came on our TV screens and said, "You must stay at home. You can't go out. You can't go to work as you normally do. You can't go to school. You can't see your friends." It was a big moment. I remember where I was when that happened. Some of us might remember 24 years ago this week when the planes flew into the Twin Towers in New York, and just remember exactly where you were, what was happening. The world seemed to change in an afternoon. Maybe before that, it was in 1997 when Princess Diana died. I remember, even though I was very young at that time, I remember where I was, who I was with, how we felt. Sometimes news strikes you like that, and it's just imprinted in your memory and in your heart forever. Today we're going to look at some news that Paul, the apostle, whose words we're going to read together, called the gospel, which literally means good news, by the way. So when you hear the word gospel, that's what it means. This is news that for many, many here, you will remember the day when you first heard it. You will remember where you were, what you were doing, who you were with. Not for everyone, but for most of you here, perhaps, when you first heard it, when it came to your heart, you remember it well. It was a memorable day for you, and your life has never been the same since. Your identity, your security, your purpose in life has completely changed because of that news. And so today, as we start in this new series in the book of Romans, we're going to see that it starts with a proclamation of good news. And I want to unpack for us today and show us that this is the news. This news is the truth that every heart secretly craves, that everyone secretly longs for. Now, we're going to be traveling through this book over the next 13 Sundays. Now, a couple of my preaching heroes, when I looked at the series that they did in Romans, one took 255 Sundays and one took 366 Sundays. So you might appreciate that this is pretty quick. This is a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the book of Romans, but I do trust God's going to help us as we go through it in this term. But I also believe that you are going to benefit from digging deeper into it for yourselves. And those of you who have children in years 5 and 6, you'll be pleased to know that your children are going to be going through this material also. So you can dive into this with them and explore together. I think that's such a good thing to do. Parents here, do speak with your children, maybe over the breakfast table or when it might be, about what you're picking up, about what God's showing you in his word, what he's speaking to your heart about. It's so helpful to do it. Shall we dive in? So what is Romans? It is originally a letter written by the Apostle Paul, a senior figure in the church, who was writing to a fairly new church in Rome, which was essentially the capital of the world at the time. It was an enormous city, and he's writing in 57 AD or thereabouts, so about 25 years after the death of Jesus and his resurrection, of course. And at the time of this letter, there's seemingly already a substantial church in the city of Rome. What was it like? Well, in the final chapter, in Romans chapter 16, we see a glimpse of what this church was like, because Paul writes at the end of the letter and mentions those that he's writing to. So we tend to put at the beginning of our letter, "Dear so-and-so." Well, right at the end of the letter, he actually sends greetings to 27 different people who were in the church. And we see something in these names, some clues as to who they were. But we're just going to read the first few verses of Romans 16 just to see who this letter was to. Firstly, Paul writes this: "I commend to you our sister Phoebe, a deacon of the church in Cenchreae." Now, you understand this. A deacon is a senior servant leader in the church. Phoebe had been sent on Paul's behalf to deliver this letter to the church in Rome and probably to read it out loud to them. Paul says this: "I ask you to receive her in the Lord in a way worthy of his people and to give her any help she may need from you, for she has been the benefactor of many people, including me. Greet Priscilla and Aquila, my fellow workers in Christ Jesus. They risked their lives for me. Not only I, but all the churches of the Gentiles are grateful to them." So he mentions some names here, Priscilla and Aquila. Now, those of you who are familiar with the Bible, you might have come across these names before because they pop up in different places. They pop up not only in Rome, but also in Ephesus, which is in modern-day Turkey, but also in Corinth in modern-day Greece. Priscilla and Aquila were a couple who were really key associates of Paul's. And they were known for their hospitality, their gift to teach and encourage. And they were really, as you can see there, the church were very, very grateful for them. And then as we read on in Romans 16, we see different types of names. We see Latin names, we see Greek names, we see names that were Jewish. There was a very, very diverse church there. And some, as scholars tell us, some were actually slave names. So we've got some wealthy people in the church who may have lived in nice Roman villas, and we've got those who were slaves who would have not lived in very nice places. And you have to understand the slaves in those days would have been responsible for wiping their master's bum. So like this is the lowest of the low in terms of society. And Paul is listing their names and he's greeting them all because he loves them. He's deeply relational. And he's not making a distinction between rich and poor here. They are in the church and they're part of it. They're one in Jesus. Listen, the communion meal that we sometimes take together on a Sunday, it's a great leveler, isn't it? Where rich and poor, old and young, people from different ethnicities come together and enjoy the same meal. It brings us together. We're united in Jesus. So 27 names are mentioned, and it's very reasonable to assume that this is only a small segment of the church in Rome. It's large. It's a large and diverse church like Hope Church. But the big difference, friends, is that this church was not able to gather publicly as we do. This would have been a church meeting in smaller homes in some secrecy because the empire at the time was very against Christianity. And so these people would have been fearful at times, fearful for being found out for being a Christian, fearful for being shamed publicly, fearful for maybe being in trouble with the authorities just because of their faith in Jesus. So it's a very difficult time in which they live. And Paul is writing to them to encourage them in this difficult moment in which they're living. But he's also writing to them that they might come to be united because they're from very, very different backgrounds. Now, our government has an idea that if we have lots and lots of different people coming into the country to come and boost our economy and so on, that they might all just get along. And as we've sadly come to see, that doesn't always happen. It doesn't work out like that. People need something to unite them because there's a lot of differences, whether that be in the way we look or in the way we speak or in the cultures that we have, in the interests that we have, the things we eat. There's a lot of differences. It's not simply a case of saying, get on well with everyone. People from very different backgrounds. Paul is saying there is something that unites you. And he says it in Romans 15 when he prays that they may with one mind and one voice glorify the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. His heart in sharing this good news with them, one of the things is to encourage them in an unstable world, but the other is that they might come to be united despite their great diversity, that they might be united in Jesus. Now, I want to encourage you, friends, as we unpack this book in the weeks to come, to treasure it for yourself. We have the writings of one early church leader in the 4th century called John Chrysostom, and he writes that he read Romans twice every week and often 3 or 4 times. And he said, "Gladly do I enjoy the spiritual trumpet. It rouses and warms my heart." This is a man who, just a few centuries after it was written, was finding that this roused him and warmed him then. And as we treasure it, friends, this will do the same for us. And I want to encourage you to go deep into this in your own time, to read the letter to the Romans, see the truths in it for yourself. And maybe you would like to get a hold of this book, which is called Romans, a letter that makes sense of life by Dr. Andrew Ollerton. This is a really excellent book that you will benefit from. I really believe that. It's a book that is very accessible for many, many people and just goes deeper into each chapter so that you can apply this truth to your lives for yourself. Now, let's get into it, shall we? We're going to go to chapter 1. Let's see the very first few verses of Romans chapter 1. Paul, a servant of Christ Jesus. It might say in your version, a slave of Christ Jesus. Called to be an apostle and set apart for the gospel of God. We've got the gospel there already. The gospel he promised beforehand through his prophets in the Holy Scriptures regarding his Son, who as to his earthly life was a descendant of David, and who through the Spirit of holiness was appointed the Son of God in power by his resurrection from the dead. Jesus Christ our Lord. Let's jump forward now to verse 13. I don't want you to skip across this. Maybe read it for yourself later. Just for the sake of time, let's read on. Verse 13. I do not want you to be unaware, brothers and sisters, that I planned many times to come to you, but have been prevented from doing so until now, in order that I might have a harvest among you, just as I have had among the other Gentiles, the Gentiles being those that are not from a Jewish background. I am a debtor to both Greeks and non-Greeks, both to the wise and to the foolish. That is why I'm so eager to preach the gospel also to you who are in Rome. For I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew and then to the Gentile. For in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed, a righteousness that is by faith from first to last, just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. Paul was convinced that the news that he trumpeted all around the known world at the time was the news that everyone needed to hear, and that it was actually the truth that every heart secretly craves. And he was feeling the need here to say, I am not ashamed of the gospel, which means it's possible that we might sometimes feel embarrassed by the good news of Jesus. That we might sometimes feel like we need to dumb it down somehow, or to maybe when it comes up in a subject in the office, we might think, I'll try and get out of this conversation as quickly as possible. Or maybe it would be the most embarrassing thing in the world for your friends at school or college or wherever it might be to find out that you're a Christian and that you go to church. It's possible to feel a sense of shame. And listen, Rome was in its prime at this time. I mean, millions even now go to Rome to imagine what it might have been like back in the day, to see something of the glory that it once had. It would have been an intimidatingly impressive place. 1 million people lived there at the time. The Colosseum was being built at the time of Paul's writing, which would have contained 50,000 people for entertainment. It was such an impressive place. And I sometimes go to London and walk around the finance areas there and think, man, this place has got so much money compared to Ipswich. I look at it and think, Matt, these people look so important, walking around in their nice suits with their expensive coffees and going off to important meetings, changing the world in big ways. It's possible to go to places like that and think, what do these people actually need? They have everything that they could possibly ever need, we might think. They have everything they could possibly ever want. They've got such riches, such wealth. And Paul knew Rome's reputation very well, and he would have been tempted to feel the same, to feel ashamed of the news. These were the most impressive people on the planet to the world's eyes, and they knew it. They would have been very proud of it. They seemed to have everything, but Paul was convinced that whilst Rome had everything you could ever want, all the entertainment, all the power, all the prestige, he knew that it did not have everything it truly needed. And that's the premise of today's message, is that the good news is needed and it's actually secretly desired by everyone. I wonder how Paul could have such confidence in his assertion. Friends, I want you to understand he had lived the high life. He had reached the top of his previous profession. He became a very, very high-ranking Jewish religious leader. He got to the top. He had power. He had means. He had reputation. People knew his name, and it turned him into a monster. And he had Christians thrown in prison and killed because what they believed in his mind was heresy. And then one day he encountered the risen Jesus, and his life was completely transformed. And he came to see, Jesus, it's only you that I need. His life completely transformed, friends. So he had come to see that actually, even those who seem like they have it all sewn up, and maybe you can think of people in your lives who seem like they have it all together, they desperately need to know the risen Jesus. He was convinced that this is what the world needed. And he had confidence that this news was powerful because it had transformed him and it would transform others as well. He wasn't naive. He knew that Rome had the wealth and the power and the entertainment. He knew that his readers in Rome, those that would hear this letter, might be tempted to think, what could they possibly need this news for? What could my friends and family members possibly need this news for? But he knew that deep down there's a craving in every human heart for something more. And Herman Bavinck, a Dutch theologian from the last century, he taught that the gospel doesn't come to us like some unexpected package that we haven't ordered on our doorstep, and we think, what on earth is this? As if we've not really gone looking for it. It comes instead as the answer to the deepest longings of the human soul. It actually connects with the restless desires that nothing else can quite satisfy. And so when Paul is trumpeting this good news, he's not just peddling some hobby for religious types, those who like a bit of religion. He's announcing that this truth really does meet the deepest cravings of every heart, every soul. We'll look into them in some depth in just a moment, but just to reel them off quickly, he says that the good news comes to the hunger that we have within us to belong to something bigger than ourselves. He says it comes to the quest that we have to be morally right in this confusing world. It comes to the desire that we have for deliverance from this world where we know things are not as they should be. It comes to our need for some kind of hope or comfort for the future, which we can't control. And finally, it comes to our desire to connect with the reality beyond this world. And friends, I want to say this. Everyone is looking for acceptance by the reality beyond all reality. Everyone is looking for that, whether they articulate it like that or not, whether they say it like that or not. Everyone is looking for acceptance from the one who created them. And so Paul says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. I'm not ashamed of the good news. It's the power of God for everyone who believes. Not just a set of ideas, not just another philosophy to add to the millions that are out there. It's the very power of God breaking into human lives. And Rome could boast of lots of power, military power, economic power, cultural power. Paul's saying there is a power that you need to know, and he's not ashamed to proclaim it. It reaches Jews and Gentiles. It reaches wealthy villa owners. It reaches poor slaves. It reaches former Pharisees, religious leaders. It reaches secular Romans. And sometimes, friends, we might think to ourselves, maybe when a friend is in dire need, maybe when they've hit rock bottom, we might say, well, they really need to hear this. And we might think, I really need to bring them to church or really need to bring to Alpha. Great. But listen, there is no one that you know who doesn't really need to hear this. There is no one that you know who doesn't need to know this news for themselves. And right at the heart of this good news, Paul says it's this. In the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed. The deepest longing of our hearts is to be made right with God, to know his acceptance, to be reconciled to him. And as Paul shows us here, and as he'll unpack through the rest of this letter, it's by faith from first to last. It's by trusting in him. So let's just look a little bit more now at how this guy Bavinck saw it. He saw that in every culture and in every heart, there are 5 longings that are met in the gospel of Jesus Christ. But he also saw that in every human heart, there is a substitution that has taken place. And that's something we'll look at a little bit more as I take us further into Romans chapter 1 next week. But every human heart has substituted God for something else. But every heart longs for these 5 things. Try as they might, they can't escape them. It's just part of being human. The first is this longing to belong to something bigger than our lives to give a sense of greater meaning and purpose. Listen, you can survive perfectly well on your own now. Like you could get the Just Eat app and you could order food to your house every day. And you could have all the entertainment you could possibly want at the press of a button. And it would last you years going through the different streaming services. You could just live on your own. And yet none of us want that. We all want to be part of something bigger than our lives, to give us our sense of identity and purpose and meaning. I was at Portman Road on Friday night, 28,000 people there. Someone had kindly gifted me a ticket, and it was brilliant being there. Town won 5-0. It was a great experience. I love football. But listen, if this world is all an accident, if we are just accidentally here as a result of billions of years of evolution, as a result of some atoms colliding together hundreds of billions of years ago, don't you think it's really strange that people will spend thousands of pounds on season tickets, on replica shirts, on travel to away games, on the food at the ground, just to go and watch 22 men kick a ball around? Isn't that a really weird thing? Like football, I love it. But there's this sense that's going on in the hearts of people watching is that I want to be part of something bigger than myself. It doesn't happen just in football. It happens in the music industry. And you get stans, these kind of ultra fans of pop stars who just want to travel around the world to see their favorite act in concert in different places and want to have every album and every kind of special edition of every album and every poster and every social media post that person makes, because they want to feel part of something bigger. They want to feel part of a community. It happens in politics. People get wrapped up in particular political parties and think, I want to be a part of something that's bigger than my life. I want to connect with something wider to give myself a sense of identity and purpose. It happens in all kinds of ways. It happens in communities that form around different lifestyles and different ways about seeing sexuality and so on. I want to be a part of a community. Friends, it's this longing in our heart. And we'll come back to that in a minute. It's an intriguing thing. The second is a desire to be morally right. There is a desire to be morally right. Listen, everyone knows that there are some things that are wrong and there are some things that are right. Everyone knows that, but we disagree on what they are. But isn't it a strange thing that people have such a conviction about morality if we are just an accident? Which is the prevailing narrative in our society. That there is no designer, there is no creator, and that we just evolved from some kind of prehistorical soup. That's what is taught. That is what is held by many people. And yet we have such convictions about what is right and wrong. Listen, if there is no God, it is not possible to come to any objective morality. Everything is just a matter of opinion. It's my opinion against yours. Should we just go with the majority opinion? I mean, there's many societies I could point you towards where that has not gone well. Listen, you can only derive what is right and wrong by someone who actually purposefully created us and designed us, who decrees what is right and wrong. And yet people feel very strongly about these things. And they feel strongly when they've been delivered some kind of injustice or when someone else has experienced injustice. And the problem we have, friends, in a society that has turned its back on God is that people don't know how to deal with this stuff. So when someone does wrong, there's no way back for them. They get cancelled. You're done with now because you've done something wrong in the eyes of the masses. Or when someone fails by their own standards, they don't know where to go with it. Listen, we all fail, don't we? We all fail even by our own standards. And if we don't have a God to go to with this failure, then what it leads to is shame. And then that shame gets internalized because there's nowhere to go with it, and it leads to depression. That is not the only cause of depression. I want to just add that. But for many, many people, they don't know where to go with their shame because they've done things that by their own standards, they've failed. But in everyone, there's this sense of there must be some kind of right or wrong. Where does it come from? It's an intriguing thing. People are looking and longing for some clarity on these things. And we've got very confused in our society about things that for all of human history have been clear, and now we're very confused about what is a man and what is a woman. And these are things that we've had to pay judges hundreds of thousands of pounds to decree. People are looking for clarity and guidance, and even that judgment is now going to be taken to a higher court in Europe somewhere because people can't agree on what is right and wrong, but there is a desire to be right. That's an intriguing thing, is it not? I think it's in every heart. Thirdly, there is a sense that the world is in need of deliverance. We know it's not as it should be. Everyone knows that deep down the world is not as it should be. And I think this week in various news stories, I'm not focusing on one today, but I think in various news stories, there's been an exposure to the fact that different people have different ideas about what the big problem is in the world. And therefore, they have a different diagnosis and they have a different treatment. Listen, when your car breaks down, you need to go to a qualified mechanic. It's not a good idea to go to a mate who's never opened up the bonnet of his car before and say, can you tell me what's wrong here? You want to go to someone who knows what they're talking about so that they can then fix the problem, or they can propose what you should have done in order to fix the problem. And friends, we have in our world a lot of people with a lot of ideas about what the big problems are in the world. For some, it's that there's all this hatred and infidelity and greed in the world, and they see it as symptomatic of a lack of education. And so the deliverance that they prescribe is we must educate people better. And if we educate people better, then they'll put racism behind, and they'll put greed behind, and they'll put other people first. That's the idea. But I don't think that's working very well. Just want to put that one out there right now. That other people might think, well, it's a lack of equality in our society. And so what we need is a fairer system. We need a better political party. We need these particular people in power, because if we have them in power and we have these systems in place, then there'll be equality and all will be well. Once again, I would point us to history to see how that's turned out. Others might say that the big problem is we're losing our sense of coherent identity. And so people are now leaning in more into patriotism or even nationalism in place and thinking that's the way we've got to go in order to be delivered from the problems we have in our society. There are all kinds of ideas, all kinds of diagnoses going on, and all kinds of prescriptions. I want to say, friends, that I believe there's only one who can give the correct diagnosis. And it's the one who made us. We'll come back to that a little later on. But listen, we know deep down that something is not right in the world. And C.S. Lewis said it quite profoundly. He said, a man cannot call a line crooked unless he has first some sense of a straight line. So if you sense that there is something wrong in the world, where's that sense come from? Because if this world is a result of blind forces of chaos colliding together, then we should expect chaos. We should not be surprised when suffering happens, because we're in a purposeless universe that is as a result of some chaotic happenings billions of years ago. But we know that something is not right in this world. It feels like suffering and pain are unwanted, uninvited guests in the party of life. Fourthly, he noted that there was a felt need to control the outcomes of our lives, to know some security through trying to grasp some control in our lives. And I don't know if you've picked up on this, but in recent years, there's been a growing trend about people manifesting stuff. It was the Cambridge Dictionary Word of the Year last year, where people have this kind of growing idea that if I can think deeply about what I want to see happen in my life, then maybe, just maybe, I can control the outcomes of my life. I can control the purposes of my life in some way, which seems bizarre to me. But there's this growing sense in which the world's quite unpredictable and unstable, and I need to try and get control somehow. I was speaking to a friend recently, and he hoovers and he cleans his car several times a week. And I spoke to him, I said, can you do mine, please? I quite like that. But I said, why do you do this so much? And he said, this is the one bit of the world I can control. And so I'm going to keep on top of it. And it gives him comfort, just going over and over again, just every little spot and crumb. And maybe there's some people here who are just like, I'm just going through all kinds of obsessive things to try and control, try and be able to predict some things at least. It works out in other ways. Some people just think, yeah, I'm out of control, the world's out of control, I can't control things, and they just turn instead to escapism. They think I'm going to turn to alcohol or to weed or to gaming to try and put it out of my mind. I'm in this world and it's hard and I just want to put it away. We have this desire to try and control the outcome of our lives or to try and forget that we're not in control. And finally, fifthly, there's a longing to connect with the reality behind reality. Hope Church, I want you to hear this. There are far more people than you have perhaps thought that want to hear about these truths. There are far more people who are wanting to connect with the reality behind all reality. There are far more people who want to know than you have perhaps given thought to. People are longing, as I said, for affirmation by the one who they were created to know. They don't say it like that. They may not even think it like that, but they're looking. And 15 years ago or so, there was the rise of what was called at the time the new atheists, these scientists and philosophers who were very confident in proclaiming that God is not real and that there is no purpose in life and that religion is all evil. And there was a high hope amongst them that religion would just quietly go away. It's not going away. And Christianity is on the rise again in this nation. And it's because, friends, we were wired to know God. And we can't just put these thoughts away. And as we'll see next week, the truths of God are actually, they're plain to see. We can see them in creation, in his purposes. People know deep down, despite what their science lessons teach them, that there is something more, there is something beyond. And there's a longing to connect in some way, a longing for affirmation. Social media, friends, is just billions of people across the world saying, I exist, look at me, affirm me, like me. And there are people who have worked very, very hard for their rights in certain areas in life. And for them, it doesn't seem like equality under the law is now enough. It's got to be acceptance and affirmation and saying, you're well done, you're liked, you're approved of. There's this deep longing for these things. Listen, friends, this good news, the gospel of the Son of God, as Paul puts it in verse 9, is what comes to all of these longings. It satisfies all of these longings. It comes to those who are longing to be part of something bigger, and it says, for all who believe in him, who received him as Lord, he gave the right to become children of God. When we put our faith in Jesus, we get drawn into a family, a global family, a family to which we belong. It's so beautiful to pray together as family earlier. This is who we are, friends. We're drawn into something bigger than our lives. It comes to those who are looking to be morally right. The righteous ways of God are revealed in Jesus. And listen, he doesn't just say, well, you've done some things wrong, I'm going to lower the bar now. He actually comes with quite disturbing news initially. He says, I haven't come to abolish all of that and say, well, you can just do what you like. He comes instead, friends, to fulfill the law on our behalf because we cannot do it. We all fall short. Jesus did not fall short. He comes to bring fulfillment. He kept God's law perfectly. And when someone comes to faith in Jesus, his perfect obedience, his life of never putting a foot wrong, never having a moment of regret, never using or abusing other people, never exploiting others, his life of perfect obedience is accounted to you as if you had lived that life. And you don't deserve it. And so we have an answer there for those that want to bash other people over their heads when they get things wrong and cancel them, or they want to beat themselves up because they've fallen by their own standards. We've got an answer here. Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life, the one who came and fulfilled the law perfectly and who died in our place and who rose again as a substitute for our sin. It comes to that desire for moral rightness. He comes to those that know that there is something wrong in the world but don't know how to work it all out, don't know how to diagnose it. He's the one who's fully qualified because through him all things were made. He knows us better than we know ourselves. He knows what makes us tick. He knows what we need. And he comes with a diagnosis that says this: all humanity has a broken relationship with its creator and is facing the prospect of eternity under his just judgment. And what we need more than anything else is not a better political system, it's not better education, it's not a return to flag waving, but a savior. That's what we need more than anything else. Those other things may or may not be helpful. What we need is a savior. We need a redeemer, one who can reconcile us to God forever. Other things, they come and go. He has made the way. He's our deliverer. And we can point people to that. We can say it's in him that we can know deliverance. He was delivered over to death so that we could be delivered from death. He took upon himself God's wrath, his righteous anger towards our sin. He was raised to life for our justification. He's our great deliverer. And he's now about restoring all creation so that one day there will be a world where there is no more suffering and no more sickness and no more pain. That's what he's about in the world, friends. He's a redeemer. And so we can look at other things and think, if only that gets in place, then we'll be okay. No, he diagnoses the problem. He provides the solution. To those that are worried about the future, feeling tiny in this enormous world, feeling like no way to control things, he comes and he says, I can be your shepherd. This Jesus who demonstrated again and again his complete authority over nature, the one who's nothing's too hard for him, multiplied bread and fish for thousands, stopped storms, walked on water. He's saying, I can be your shepherd. So you don't need to fear. You don't need to try and control things. You can trust in me, and I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. I'll be with you until the end of the age. You can actually leave me with my job, which is running the universe. You can trust me. You don't have to run the universe. It comes to that desire, friends, to control things. The good news comes to bear to it. And finally, it comes to those who want to seek the reality behind all reality. We don't have to try and guess what God is like. Jesus said, I and the Father are one. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. There's no shadowy figure hiding behind the back of Jesus. Jesus fully represents what God is like. So if you want to know what your Creator is like, look at Jesus. You don't have to scratch around looking for all kinds of weird spiritualist stuff that is actually not just weird, it's evil and it's damaging. You can look at Jesus, the full revelation of God, your Creator, the exact imprint of his nature. Jesus alone, friends, is the answer. This is why Paul is not ashamed of the gospel. He knows it's what people need, and he knows it's what people desire deep down. And he'd been transformed by the message. And he still is, by this point, he's still pinching himself. He's still in awe at what Jesus has done for him. 5 years ago, when we were in the height of lockdown, my son drew a picture and sent it into Blue Peter. Now, if you're not familiar with what Blue Peter is, it's a kids' TV program. And you can, if you write into Blue Peter, you can receive a Blue Peter badge. Anyone have a Blue Peter badge here? None of you, a few of you. You've made it in life, well done. And he actually got this Blue Peter badge by providing a picture of some rats that we had to have dealt with in our garden. He just drew, he's 5 years old at the time. He drew a picture of these rats, sent it to Blue Peter. It was locked down. They probably had not much on to do. So they just sent him a Blue Peter badge, which is very, very kind of them. And it only dawned on us just the other day that we've never taken advantage of the Blue Peter badge. Because the Blue Peter badge gets you access for free into a whole bunch of different places. And we've never used it. It's just sat somewhere on my son's shelf, this badge and ID card that he could have got into stuff for free using it. And listen, sometimes, friends, this is how we treat the good news. We think, well, I believed that 25 years ago, and it was great at the time. I think I got baptized, and it was good, and we celebrated, and it was good. And then we just go on along in life and don't really pay much attention to it. What Paul is demonstrating here is he's still wowed by the gospel 25 years on from his conversion or so. He's still wowed by it. It's still something that he's rejoicing in daily, still something he's standing upon daily, still something he's trusting in daily. Friends, we don't want to be those that say, we come to the judgment one day and say, God, yeah, I've got this card somewhere. I think I once believed. We want to be those that rejoice and go on. I mean, this verse, I'm not ashamed of the gospel because it's the power of God to salvation for all who believe, could be better translated for all who are believing. It's a continuous tense. We go on believing it. We go on rejoicing in it. We go on celebrating and placing our trust in it. And as we do that, friends, we actually find that what people think of us matters less and less and less. Because we've come to know the acceptance of the one whose opinion matters. The only one whose opinion matters. And some of you are so caught up in what will my mates think about this. I spoke to someone this week who's just become a Christian, and he rang his friends and he was like, there's something I want to tell you. And it was like the biggest moment because he thought, they're going to take the mick out of me. Listen, some of you is just so caught up on what will they say if I started giving my life to Jesus and walking with him. Listen, when we drink this news in deeply, that we're accepted and we're affirmed by, we're loved by the only one whose opinion matters, when we rejoice in it, go on believing it, then the opinions of other people look less and less important. We start to put them aside. We start to say, I'm not living for that anymore. Paul reflects on this for himself in Galatians 5, where he says this, am I now trying to win approval of human beings or of God? Am I trying to please people? If I was still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. Listen, there will come a time, probably this week, when you'll be faced with the opportunity to be ashamed of the gospel, to dumb it down somehow, to water it down, maybe to change it, or to try and make it look more cool, or to somehow just pretend that you're not really into it, or to proclaim, yeah, actually I do. I believe in Jesus. I trust in him. It's the most important thing in my life. There'll be an opportunity. Friends, as we drink deeply of this good news, as we take it on board, I think we'll be those that say like Paul, I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed of it. It's the power of God. Everyone needs to know it. Everyone needs this good news. There is no one who doesn't need it. But I want you to understand this, guys. You can't make it cool. You can't. At the heart of this gospel, at the heart of this good news, is a really, really pathetic picture. The heart of it is a man who had made some big claims about his life, who had taught some wondrous things, but then who had been arrested and whipped to within an inch of his life and then nailed to a cross. At the heart of it is this picture of this man who looks to the world like an utter failure, who'd had his beard plucked out and stripped naked, and he's standing there, struggling for every breath. At the heart of the gospel is that picture, friends. And to the world that thinks it has it all together and is wise in its own eyes, that is foolishness. It's not cool. We can't change it, friends, but it's the power of God for salvation to all who are believing. All who will humble themselves and say, this is what I need. I need him. I need him who took my place on the cross. I need him who died in my place, who took the righteous anger of God upon himself for me, who rose in my place. I need him. Friends, we can't make it cool. But as we drink in the deep love of God that our soul craves for, as we drink it in, we'll be able to say, I'm not ashamed of this. It's what you need to hear. So friends, I think there's probably quite a lot of people here who don't yet know Jesus. Just in a room this size, there's hundreds of us here. There's some today that you need to decisively give your life to him. In light of what he's done for you, there needs to come a moment where you say, I'm in. And we're going to do this a little bit differently. If you know today there's a moment where you need to give your life to him, I want you to stand where you are and just say, Jesus is Lord. Like, that's a big deal.